In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how I'm building my real estate development company, Human Capital. I'm going to go into our goals, both long and short term, the strategy to enact those goals. It's a unique strategy because there are unique challenges with what we're setting out to do, as well as real hard numbers with where we're at and where we're going. This is all driven by something I've discussed in other videos, which is the inherent mountain of a challenge that comes with starting and scaling a real estate development company, especially one where you want to maintain autonomy and creative control over the projects that you take on, pursue, and execute on. That is the challenge that we are facing. We have set out to do it in a way that I'm not familiar with anyone else doing it in this way that I'm calling the phantom thread method, and I'll explain that in just a bit. But everything as far as planning should always start with goals. At least that's how I like to do it. And the overarching long-term goal, without a question, is simply put, building the best hotels in the world. And although my personal ambitions and thoughts on this have bounced back and forth and continue to do so over time between building a big hotel company, a brand like the Amans and the Auberge resorts of the world, and building small independent boutique hotels, but building a portfolio of them up over time, perhaps not even connected under an overarching brand. The base of the goal is just to build the best hotel experiences in the world because that's what I love. I love to travel. Those are my favorite experiences that I've ever had in my life. That is what I want to do. The exact what of the end result does not matter to me. This is all I want to do. The how then becomes important. And the good thing about this is whether ultimately long-term I decide I want to end up over here or over here, it does not matter in the short term. All I have to do is keep doing more hotels, one after the next, better than the last. And if I do want to head in this direction at some point, there will have to be some strategizing around creating that brand and that portfolio. But frankly, I've got a lot to improve on before I would hope to get in that direction. So simply to stay in line with the long-term goal, all I have to do is keep doing what I'm doing. But as I've highlighted earlier and in other videos, there is a huge challenge with this when it comes to funding the pursuit of new real estate development projects. And the only solutions that exist out there or that I've seen other development companies do really take away all of what I want to maintain, which is namely the choice, the freedom to choose which projects I pursue, the creative agency in managing and executing on those projects, and controlling as much of each project that I do as possible in terms of decision making as well as financially in the outcome, so that I don't have to chase a million projects. And if I just want to do 6 hotels over the next 25 years, that could be fine. So how are we going to do this? How are other people doing it? How are we doing it? So I've mentioned in these other videos that traditionally for developers to solve this problem, this large delay between putting out effort on a new project and then when you start to see some reward from that and how you stack that with multiple projects over time, it is starting a coordinate operating businesses, the traditional ones for real estate being brokerage, project management, and property management. I would say to date, what we've been doing really is in the project management sphere, in that it's just a service executing on parts of the deal that would otherwise be part of the principal developer's role, as well as, creative capacities within a development deal. Point being, providing that as a service. We started first with financial modeling and investor materials creation, and then getting more involved with the advisory of the capital raise throughout the entire process. And then as of more recently, the creative services that we've started doing on our own projects first has since become a fee revenue business with third-party clients approaching us for those same services. The problem with these business models, as well as all of these, is that they are labor-based. Labor as a resource has the least leverage. It has the most, in my experience, subjectively headache and operational complexity and time input needed compared to other models and other forms of value and leverage, such as capital and technology. That's why at a certain point, as I was getting started, I came across this guy, Peter Levels, and got incredibly inspired. Peter Levels is a guy that has multiple online businesses, very simple softwares. He's in this world that people refer to as indie hackers or indiepreneurs. These guys are making softwares that are so simple, so niche, so specific that they can be run by one person, a part-time contractor, at 90% plus profit margins. But because they are so specific and so niche, the development cost, the complexity, the maintenance cost is much farther down. The only reason it even makes sense to pursue is because the development cost today has come so far down. It makes sense to, for example, create a job board just for remote workers, just in these specific categories. There's no one else competing you within that space. The niche nature of the product becomes its advantage. There's a lot more I could get into here, but I got deep into this space a couple of years ago, and I saw in that something that I thought could create a solution for this problem over here, which would be, rather than relying on labor for leverage, implement a technology solution. And I got started on it right away. When I came across him in the summer of 22, or the spring, I started first on a productization of the financial modeling component of the business we were already doing. I never even considered scaling up, automating, systematizing the creative side, though I wanted to continue doing the creative, not out of a goal to turn that into a sustainable operating business, because that is now a core competency that we have for our own projects. I never wanted to scale that up to be the coordinate operating business, because that's not why I do it. I do it to make my projects as good as they can be, to scale and put people under me. It just was never a business I wanted to grow and scale. So naturally, I'd look towards the financial modeling, the capital raising sphere, and for something there to create a product around. The first product was selling packaged data reports for Airbnb analysis. It did not go that great. Ended up being there was a product in the market that had a dominant position that shifted to capture exactly what I was doing anyways. So I'm glad I didn't push that business forward any farther than I did. But after that, I turned to the other part of the business that I had been doing, which was investor presentations, investor communications. And I'll spare you in this video the long development of how that played out. But ultimately, what that has brought me to over a 2.5-year timeline of multiple constant iterations and investment in a mass amount of time is a product called DealPage, which I hope to be that solution to drive my development business forward. Simply put, DealPage is an investor communication tool, investor marketing tool. It helps developers make better offering materials, send them and track stats, create and share data rooms, write and send investor updates, and share portfolios with their track records easily. This is what that looks like. You simply fill out basically web forms. It outputs these digital investor presentations or hosts traditional PDF presentations. You have the ability to track the analytics, as you can see here, who's viewing, create these data rooms so that it's easier to share files with your investors. A lot of these features, all of these features really are not novel. What's novel is the simplicity of the platform, the price of the platform compared to other softwares that not only encompass these communication components, but also vast swaths of the asset management landscape, making them very complex and very expensive. I have niched this down and focused on these core problems that every developer faces. Now, where we're at, this isn't a pipe dream. We've had 300 plus users over the last year and a half since launching less than a year since launching the first true software version. Lifetime, including when this was a pseudo software, I was really delivering it as a service, over $100,000 in revenue, 15 to 20,000 just in software revenue, plus recently pre-sales as I'm ramping up and preparing to launch the V2, the iteration after the MVP launch that we had last year. So more than proven out compared to software ideas that a lot of people raise money on. This is where we're at with it. This is why I feel confident in it. Now, a lot of this video was prompted by somebody asking me recently about my 3-year goals. I told you my long-term goals. All that matters is we stay on the path. With that path, there's certain challenges. DealPage is how I want to solve for those challenges. What does that look like in the short term so I can plan? And we'll get to current revenue and numbers at the end of this video. The goals are simply live in New York with an apartment that I love and a studio office. I say studio office because I want it to be a creative space as much as it is a technical business office space. I want DealPage covering burn. That's our base. I want as small of a team as possible. And I want to be pursuing then principal projects with the profit of time and capital that we have to put forth towards those new developments. So what that looks like is an apartment that I love, an office that is as much of a creator space, maker space as it is a technical office space. As small of a team as possible, focusing on the highest leverage forms of business, namely media and technology here, to help drive forward ultimately our creative and long-term pursuits in hotels. I call this the Phantom Thread method because if you've ever seen that movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, he's a dressmaker. He's become so world-renowned at that one skill that, presumably based off the lifestyle shown in the movie, he's doing very, very well financially. He's got a team of maybe 6 dressmakers. And when I saw that movie, I was just inspired by the leverage in his case that he got from his skill and name recognition with effort put in, with team and labor resources put in, and what he was able to get out. That is my focus. I want to have as small of a team as possible in this company because I know in real estate development, what is our long-term pursuit, it does not take a massive company to do what we want to do, to build these unique hotel concepts and take principal positions in those projects. You don't need a massive team. You need a massive team to solve for the pre-development challenge, which hopefully we're solving for with DealPage, which Peter Levels and others, he's not the only one, have shown can be done with micro or niche SaaS products focused on a specific problem and a specific solution with high profit margins and very small teams. So that is the goal and the plan to hopefully set us up to where we can enact on visions like these. I have 2 specific concepts that I want to do next. One out in nature, more rural, one in the city, in New York City. And so that we can own and control as much of that process as possible and own as much of the upside as possible. Now, this isn't just dreaming. I've sat down and spent a ton of time thinking about the financials behind this, both when really, philosophizing on this mountain of a problem in real estate development and going through specific numbers on what happens if you own X percent of the GP, and if you do deals that are this big, and if you own this much or this much, and the different ways you can finance it. I've gone over this over and over again in my head. I generally have a sense for how many projects I want to target to get done in my career and in my company's lifetime, what sizes of projects I want to do. And I'm able to then look at, with this plan, what are the financial realities at a micro level, at the operational level. And about 6 months ago, I sat down and I charted out all the costs on a business standfront, assuming a move to New York, as well as on a personal standfront, and certain thresholds I want to meet around saving half my income or only spending half of my income, reinvesting a certain amount into the business. And again, this is broad strokes, but where I basically ended up was at 60 grand a month in essentially baseline burn. Now, if we're just talking about covering that 60K a month and we're assuming DealPage has a 90% profit margin, which I believe it will, that's 66K a month in revenue needed at an average of $100 a month per user. I think it could be higher. That's a conservative estimate. That means I need 660 users. Given that I've had 300 to date, not all paying, certainly have to, say that caveat, but without really a functioning product, without really pushing it out there in any major way, I feel confident that that is possible, 100%. There's 8,000 real estate developers in the US between 1 and 20 employees, including partners. So that's our target market just in the US. So 660 users gets us to where our covering burn. Imagine it stops there, and you may say, well, you're just covering burn. Do not forget, the entire purpose with this is to own as much as this as possible. The goal is to develop hotels. What is possible here in terms of revenue, which would be in the hundreds of thousands, and certainly up to millions on the ownership front in the form of the promotes on these deals. So that's what's critical. When I've had this discussion with people in the past, they get so locked in on the strategy around DealPage. And it's not that I want to limit DealPage. It's that we need to think backwards from the long-term goal and think about a means to an end and the function that any of these pursuits serves. And ultimately, the North Star is hotels. The value and the immense potential in wealth creation and business success is in the hotels. DealPage is a tool to serve that. Now, it's taken years. It's been a lot of hard work, but I finally feel like I'm close. And I use this as an opportunity to map out the next 6 months. And I looked at the revenues, my expenses. Keep in mind with the figures on the screen, these are broad ranging contracts that have been played out over a number of months. And a lot of times expenses are very front weighted, and a lot of the revenue that comes ultimately to the company comes much later. So as I'm looking to close these contracts out, they can seem heavily skewed, but there's been a lot of investment up front. But all that matters now is I've got all these projects really in the crosshairs to be wrapped up. Hotel Pearl, I'm involved in on a contract basis monthly, namely around creative and marketing, that now that it's open could effectively end at any time whenever we decide it's best for the project. It doesn't look like it's going to be best anytime soon. The Petty Ranch, Petty Cache in Utah, and the Boulders are developments that are underway. I expect Petty to end in June. I expect Boulders to really start construction around May and then continue towards September, October, where it ends. And then Oxedo is a project I've been working on for a long time. I actually expect a little bit of a marketing push to ideally get that deal closed. But if I can, there's a big payday that I'm not really underwriting into my projections right now, but that could be a game changer. My takeaway from this is that the company is in a good spot for really the next 4 to 5 months. And if my goal is by the end of the year, as it was last year, but I was not ready, December, is to move to New York and get to this steady state, 3-year, lock in, and start building the base, establishing the base, and then moving on to develop our own principal projects, I need to be thinking about, and I am, ramping up the DealPage marketing through this period so that it is accelerating towards the end of the year. And some of the considerations I've been having around, namely, increasing scope with a couple of opportunities for contract expansion that I have in a few places. That was out of a lack of understanding of where we were at in the projections. I feel comfortable really focusing all efforts outside of these current contracts and current projects on this down here. This, like I said, has taken years, and at a lot of times the focus on DealPage has shifted far to the back burner and slowed down because I've taken so much on. I now feel like I've gotten the company to a place where it has built up enough of a track record where we should not be pursuing contract expansions and new projects just because of that. And the only reason something should take precedent over DealPage, given DealPage's importance in our long-term goal, is if it has a greater effect on our long-term goals, such as a certain amount of track record or in a certain area or a certain amount of exposure or just financials from that opportunity. The main point being, we are turning a corner where we have about a 6-month to 8-month stretch here to really ramp things up at an accelerating pace as well. Right now, I'm doing webinars once a week for DealPage, just building up some momentum. But as more time and resources frees up as we get further into the spring, the push is going to go harder. We're going to layer on some light service packages alongside DealPage, just because to get to 660 is going to take time. How do we increase our revenue in the short term? It's layering on some of that service that we've provided over the years alongside DealPage that will also help sell customers and get them onto the platform as they're trying it out for the first time. Over time, though, want that to phase out. Don't want to scale that up as a investor marketing agency and get back to the point that I've dreamed of for years for this company, which is steady state, bases covered, as little effort as possible, as much time and profits left over to go pursue deals into the future. So that's my company and how we're doing it going forward. Thanks for watching.